Welcome to the Position Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Capasso, and we're here to learn together. I'm on a personal research project to understand how elite performers in the sports, military, and the creative arts make successful transitions into their personal and professional lives beyond those early pursuits and endeavors. And I have a theory with the environment that someone chose or that chose them, and the position or role that someone played in that environment that they chose or that chose them can provide the keys to understanding their best path forward. We're just getting started, and I'm excited to share these dynamic stories with you. Let's dive in. I was thinking about all the roles that you play, and all of us play a lot of roles in life, but I see how devoted father you are, right? 100% the family, husband, right? You're an entrepreneur at heart and have been for a long time. You're an allocator of funds. You're a coach and mentor to a lot of people. So tell me a little bit about how do you balance all of that? Like how do you think about how and where you spend your time? And I know how important it is for you to play all those roles to the best of your ability. So how do you do that? How do you think about that?
Well, I come to the fact that there's only 24 hours in the day. That's my guiding North Star is, what's the constraint with which I have to operate in the box, I guess you could say. Um, and then what I try and do, the first thing is just make a cut on what is not aligned with the long-term plan. Like, what is it we're here to do? Whether it's me as Chris, the businessman, the fund manager, the father, the husband, just my own personal, like, just staying fit, making sure I'm here to, mountain bike and snowboard with my kids in 20 years. Like, there's all these competing things for time and attention, and there's only 24 hours in a day. So the first thing is kind of riffing out, like, what's tactical but not strategically aligned, right? Kind of like OKR type stuff. And then you're left with, okay, this is the stuff that actually should matter according to what we think we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. And then I love shared track. So not having to do either or, but both and. Don't compromise on this, like harmonize on it. And so it's like, hey, if I've got to go to work here in this place and I'm due for date night and my kids have been in the snow for the past 4 months, guess what? We're all going to Miami, right? Like some way where you can, give the kids an adventure, be a good husband, do your conference, make it all happen and have shared infrastructure. Like you still have the same hotel room. The plane's taken off at the same time and location. And instead of being, them being back there and you being there, you can all load up at the same time. So it's just kind of like that stuff, right? It's like, let's go outside and get some sunshine. Let's also bond as a family. Let's get a little exercise. Fantastic. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to plant a garden. We're going to plant a garden because that gets us outside. We're eating healthy. We get to grow things and create memories around that and learn about photosynthesis and all that kind of jazz. And it was 1 45-minute investment of time in the same location, and all of the market participants that were important were involved. Right?
Yeah, I love that, the efficiency in that. Well, because I really struggle personally with blending those things, especially when I'm in business or work environments. I tend to get a little overly focused, and it's hard for me to split my time. Do you ever feel like you're getting split? You feel that tension in your stomach that you should be spending time here, maybe murdering the kids or in the hotel, and meetings running long, and what do you do in those scenarios? And do those come up, and how does the family deal with that?
That is a really good question. I think that's where the magic is in the disciplined ability to have some kind of a schedule and a framework around here's what we're doing today. Here's the allocation of time. Here's my sort of window to do that. But then availing yourself to happenstance and serendipity. So it sounds like an oxymoron, but like being able to schedule spontaneity or being open to like break glass, end meeting, mid-course corrections, if you will, because that's the dynamic nature of the more people that are in your orbit, the more probabilities that something dynamic is going to happen, right? Let alone just you as a sole participant in the universe, like things will happen to you too. So if you're super rigid, well, now you're going to have concessions, and then there's potential animosity, and then there's, should have done this, should have, would have, could have, whatever. But I think if you're like, hey, look, this is what needs to happen. And then being able to say, you know what, I need to end this thing early, or we're not going to do that, or this thing that was supposed to be a face-to-face it's just going to be a phone call. I mean, how many times have you got stuck in traffic or something's going on? And a lot of times it's just weird to think that people are like, hey, there's this obstacle. This now takes priority. I'm sorry, I can't meet you for coffee, the dinner, and this is that. I'm like, we all still have phones, right? And so I'm just usually like, instead of being like, I'm 15 minutes out, well, that's 15 minutes of time. It's just like, hey, I'm going to talk to you for 15 minutes while I'm in motion, right? So at least we're making forward progress, even though we're not. Do you need to really look at me right now? No, we're going to talk, right? And then you walk in the door, you've got 15 minutes of the meeting already done, shake hands, finish up the other 15 minutes of the meeting, whatever, right? So I just think there's lots of ways to just think about what's an immovable object and an immovable object and sort of harnessing the magic in that. Like if you can maneuver around it and if it can be done, but just change the construct with which you think it needs to be done, well, then you didn't have to make a concession. Nobody missed their meeting or didn't do their thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an incredible amount of like flexibility, adaptability, and just creative thinking about the situation, right? And what you're around. And it sounds like probably the family has learned how to do that together with you, or probably innately had it in them. And so I was really curious on the family front as well. I told you I rewatched your Shonk legacy family film that you guys did, which I thought was incredible. And I was just curious because we never got a chance to talk about it. I appreciate you sharing it with me. What was the inspiration behind that? What were you hoping would come of that experience together in doing that film?
I think part of it, multiple things. One is that we got a late start, right? So I'm 50 and my youngest, we're still trying to get potty trained. So there's only so much time, we all share, we're born, we die, and everything in between we can kind of control, at least, our attitude towards what happens and hopefully drive the outcome we want. We wanted to make sure that we captured our stories as a family while both my parents and my wife's parents are still alive. So that's super important because they're getting a late start, right? So who are grandma and grandpa and what's that mean to me and where did we come from? I think at the end of the day, it's like, whether it's, what is it, Citizen Kane, like Rosebud or whatever, right? Like, I mean, it's like, it's really like, who am I? Why am I here? And what am I going to do once I realize that? Right? I mean, it's just fundamental Maslow kind of stuff that, no matter how attractive or wealthy or, enabled or impeded you are, like people have those same questions. And like the gift, I think, to our kids is just the gift of relativity and perspective. Like, here's what you need to know about where you came from and why your life is kind of the life you're experiencing, and then go do with that what you will, right?
So is there anything unexpected or a surprise after having gone through that you didn't think about going in or weren't aware of? What was most unexpected?
Yeah, good question again. I was really blown away by how everyone involved in the process just loved it. And they were like, oh, I've never digitized those photos, or I never told that story. And even, I mean, these are people you've lived with your whole life, right? And you think about how many times there was a conversation to be had or something, and then all of a sudden it just takes a structured format in a declaration of, we are going to gather this intelligence, or get out the journal, the family Bible, or the pictures, whatever it is, in stories that you're like, I never knew that. Like, where did that come? Great grandpa did what? He was in the Battle of the Bulge. Like, how did I not know that? And so it just took somebody formally asking the question. It's like what you'll tell your spouse sometimes versus like a random stranger, or what goes down in a business setting versus a non-business setting. And it was all possible. It's just the context of it sometimes draws out a different answer, outcome, or tangent, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to formalize the process, I think, got people more excited about surfacing those golden nuggets or pearls, and some highlight reels came out of it that, regardless of how many Christmases had passed and family dinners, just somehow evaded being discussed.
That's amazing. I have the opposite problem with Alicia, where we'll be in a group of friends and I'll be telling a story. And she's like, I didn't know that you did that, or I didn't know you were there last week. How come I'm the last to know? I was like, oh, we just haven't had a chance to talk about it.
Well, you're a dad. And so like, the funny thing is like, it really is the wonder of the spontaneity in the moment, right? There's a beauty about kids that really we're all kids. Like that you just can't forget that we're all on this journey of play and exploration, whatever, to make it happen. I mean, life is wonderful. It's amazing. And the kids will throw you curveballs. You're doing something, you're busy. Why? Oh, so you answer the why. Why? It's kind of like, those old timey board members that were so good. And all they did was sit there and ask like why 5 times
Yeah.
and say, why are margins so poor? And you're like, but they're fantastic. And like, or like, how can we sell more? Like just simple like stuff,
Yeah.
but there's truth in simplicity, right? And so the kid dynamic, there was, when you're talking about doing it all together, we were at a conference, staying at the Fontainebleau, and the whole hotel was taken down, right? And so you had to have a badge to get in. Even the spouses, they were basically controlling access. And so we go in, and I've got the 2 kids. We just came from the airport. I got the luggage, the beat down, like everybody's tired. And so I go in, and the first thing I'm doing is like, who looks like they could be an empathetic individual that's in a position of power. And there was some woman about the same age. I'm just rolling the dice that she might be a mom, right? Boom. She's a mom with a couple kids, same age as ours. That was our gal, right? So she's like, come here. I'll expedite your check-in. Hope your kids are well. The ice cream shop's over there. Hi, wife, other thing. Completely different thing than like standing in line waiting for some rando person. So we got in faster, got the woman's name, Jill. And then my son, Asher, who's, he's 5, he watched me wake up in the morning and go to work. So I know that in tech, you don't wear suits a lot, right? So I had my suit, I had to shine my pointy shoes. I don't even remember the last time I wore pointy shoes, right? It's the Ferragamos or whatever. So I'm out there kind of playing my game and doing what I got to do. And so he wakes up early the next day, puts on his buttoned up shirt, got a lanyard. He wanted one of those little lanyards and made his own little name on a piece of paper that was like the hotel stationery, and then clipped the lanyard to it. And it was like his name with the S spelled backwards and like a little happy face and stuff like that. And I got out of the shower and I was getting ready to get dressed, and he's sitting there with his shirt tucked in and he's got his little lanyard. And he's like, I want to go to work with you today. I was like, oh my gosh. And it would have been so easy to be like, come back. We'll go to the pool. We'll build some sandcastles. Daddy's got to go to work. Like 9 times out of 10, that probably would have been the thing. And I was like, I am not going to forego this hero moment, because that's all you get is a handful of them. It's fleeting, right? I was like, fantastic. Let's go, Asher. So we went downstairs. I found that lady, Jill, and on the elevator on the walk, I got to make this a fun learning. So I went over and I said, hey, do you remember Miss Jill? This is Miss Jill. And so I said, hey, Asher, go over there real quick and count, how many flower pots are on the stairs. She goes, hey, look, I need to teach my kid some stuff. He wants to go to work with me. I've got a meeting. I just pushed it back, by 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a couple tasks. Here's $5. Give him 5 tasks. Can you be his boss for them? So we wrote him kind of down. So he came back and it's like, this is Miss Jill. She's your boss for the day. You've got 5 tasks to do. And it was, hug 20 palm trees, count how many pots were on the stairs, shake hands with 3 strangers and introduce yourself. And there's a couple other things. But anyhow, she was really cute. She just leaned into it, right? And she was like, she was a mom. She was cool. And he still remembers it. So he started, at first he was sprinting to her like most kids, like, I want to get the ice cream faster. I want that $5. So he went outside and he started hugging palm trees. And it was like just grabbing them. And then all of a sudden he got to about 10 and he was changed. And he'd walk past the closest palm tree and hug the one that was leaning or a little bit funky or didn't have the leaves. And I was like, what are you doing, Asher? And he's like, well, that one needs a hug more. And I was like, wow, the intention of it. Like, here's the task, but you get to control how you address that task. And if you're only going to hug 20 palm trees, which 20 palm trees need the most? And then he went out and started shaking hands with people. In this conference specifically, there was people that were writing checks and asking for checks. And so you had different lanyards, right? Like the allocators and the fund managers. And I was on the fund manager side. It's like, well, ask anybody with a yellow badge, right? Like, don't walk up to the money people, right? And then I was kind of like, how silly of me to gate that, right? And so he rolled up and walked up to a person with a green badge on and said, "Hi, my name's Ash." And if you see a 5-year-old kid, most of them are like buried in a device anyway, right? Shakes your hand, looks you in the eye. Where are you from? Starts talking to you. Started talking to this guy. And I, at first I was kind of like a little embarrassed, like, my kid, I didn't send my kid over here to like bird dog you or whatever, right? And he just hit off. It was cute. He's like, "Hey, that was the coolest thing. I too have a 5-year-old kid. And, we dehumanize who we really are in this whole world of big commerce and sort of what's our role. And it was really cool that you brought your kid down here to do this." And I got so many high fives, and people actually started talking about that. That girl told other people. And then, 15 minutes later, Asher's upstairs. He got his $5, but he learned how to look an adult he doesn't know in the face, introduce himself, ask where they're from, do things, made $5, and I got 15 minutes with them that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And hopefully he does too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah. That's an incredible connection between the work and giving him the opportunity to participate in that. I guess, talking more about those experiences that you might want him to remember or lean into, of all the stories that came out, maybe about you or your family in the film that you all did, are there any in particular that you really want him to know, remember, or you really appreciate that have come out so that he can have a touchstone to look back on?
Yes, I think that the crucible, there's multiple crucible moments, right? Where there's kind of the path and alternate reality, some event. And at least in my family that affected me, that he gets to hopefully leverage too, is when my father could not use his body to make money. And the limiting factors of, hey, if you're going to work trading time for dollars, and it's physical time, which is, always diminishing. And he had to go back to school with 5 kids and be like, enter the workforce as a dad with 5 kids, when he already was a carpenter. And that whole notion of using your mind as a tool and what's the highest and best use of your talents to give you the life that you need for yourself and for your family. And so that education moment, when he was the first in my whole lineage of people to go to college, right? All my ancestors. And so completely different trajectory. Like we went from food stamps to passport stamps, all based on that.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I remember that story. That's incredible. Well, I also was really intrigued by, because you don't talk a lot about this very often, but you did tell some of the story about your military career, being in special forces. You won Soldier of the Year. You got to work for a 3-star general as a part of an offshoot of that whole experience. What got you into the military, and what was that experience like for you in the end when you look back on it?
I grew up in the 80s, so loved the A-Team. Love it when a plan comes together with Hannibal. And then there was, like the Rambo, like the Hollywood dramatization of like, what is it to, be, 12-man team and scuba dive and blow stuff up and, make booby traps and field craft and all that stuff. So I just thought that would be really interesting. And like most things, probably when Top Gun came out, the pilot schools got flooded with applicants or whatever. Everybody kind of romanticizes what it would be like for the highlight reel. But I wanted to do something fun. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to get out of the house because 8 kids is a lot running around, and it just seemed amazing. And so then you keep hearing, well, no, you can't do that, or it's probably not going to happen. And, some people, that's what they need for fuel, right? Like, oh, I can't? Oh, there's going to be a way. And so they're like, you can't get into this thing. It's too hard. You're not going to do it. Just don't even waste your time. And I was like, keep feeding me that, like, can't, because that's my energy, right? And so did that. But what I think was interesting about it is that even though everybody wears the same uniform, the difference in why certain people gravitate towards certain things. So in special forces, they call it triple volunteer. So you volunteered to be in the military, you volunteered to go to airborne school, and you volunteered to go to selection. And so it's not like they're pulling you and drafting you and kicking and screaming. That's not the way to get top talent, right? Whether it's sports or whatever, you're building a startup company, anything. It's like, who out there is amazing that self-selects to be there? Because self-selecting to be part of the process, come hell or high water, you're there because you want to be, versus we constricted you or we're telling you to do, like taking ownership of your own role. And then the people that are there, I mean, everybody was Mensa, everybody was fit. Like all of a sudden, it's kind of like, you know, you're an athlete. It's really cool when you're the best in the city. When you're like competing for Olympic trials, you're like, oh, snap. Everybody's awesome. Like I'm not so awesome, actually. So then you have to kind of really go into, well, what about it? What about me is a unique attribute? If everybody here is fast, am I as fast but can jump? Or like, what can I do at the margin that the person to my right or left is less adept at doing? And then hopefully there's a culture or an esprit de corps or some kind of gravity around. If you think that, they think that. And so you get the same deck of cards and the same shared attributes of importance, but everybody at the margin is like, what do I have to bring to the table? Right? We're all here. It's a potluck dinner. You know, we don't need 20 salads, right? Like I'm the charcuterie guy. You're the wine guy. Like how do we elevate the we experience of it all through the unique individual contribution, daisy chain together of all these individuals? So it's kind of like that 1 + 1 + 1 = 12 thing.
And so what was that for you?
For me, it was a couple things. I already had, you know, come from a family of 8. So I was very used to the we. And in that group, you've got, you know, single children, you know, people that didn't have parents. Like the thing about the military that's great is it is a giant melting pot by definition. So this little world you came from of, you know, private aviation and life is good. And we had like Astors and trust fund kids that were like, that's my grandfather. That's not me. I'm going to make it on my own. I want nothing to do with that. Combined with country bumpkins who, you know, came run around in the Appalachians with their shoes off, and dad was illiterate, right? I mean, like it was everybody there because exceptional people are all around the world, but opportunities not. And so you get flung in together. There are geniuses running all over the place. And so that was really interesting. But I think what I brought to it is I was used to being a we and to serving other people. And I was just that friendly guy that's like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm ambivalent because I'm used to not being able to have anything I really like because everything I've ever had is shared. And you want my cheese and you've got peanut butter, knock yourself out because I'm just happy to have something to eat. Right. And so that ability to be kind of like a little pliable and accommodate other people's needs or to just share and be a helper was kind of my edge, I guess you could say, you know, and establish rapport, build camaraderie, and then really, I don't want to call it like better living through apathy, but when you don't really care about as much and you really have these small segment of things that matter to you and somebody else cares about more or what they value isn't what you value, I would just trade out of it. I would sacrifice it. And, you know, you want to do that? Okay. You want this role, you know, you want to go use that thing first, whatever. And then all of a sudden there's reciprocity. Like good people like team players.
Are there any specific examples or experiences that you think about looking back where that really came through and was really pivotal in that moment around that military experience?
You know, there was, yes, when I did win the Soldier of the Year and kind of got elevated up, because it starts on like a cellular level and then, you know, team and then company and then group and then all the way up. And I got to work for the 3-star. That was really where a whole new veil was open to me, like the big game, right? There's tactics and strategy, and then there's the who's shaping strategy. Where's the big, and the politics of it too. We're like, hey, like if this is not just leadership. Like at some point, leadership and politics they share infrastructure, and to be good, one has to play the game. And I'm not talking like Game of Thrones, sort of the prince type stuff, right? Machiavellian kind of thing, but just really understanding like, hey, there's competing agendas at a global level, and how do you get what you need and they get what they need? And I had this experience where this general I worked, he'd been in multiple units. And so when you're in different units, you get combat patches. So where were you? And you put the combat patch up here. And he would tailor what shirt he wore based on the audience. So if he was speaking to a bunch of JSOC, USASOC, special operations people, he would wear the one with the shared special operations kind of, you know, JSOC Delta Force patch, because we're all those people. But when he would speak with the regular army, the conventional army, we'll call it. There's some disenfranchisement that comes. You come out there showing that, right? Like, here's my gold medal. People are going to turn their ears off. Maybe there's some animosity. Maybe likelihood, some of them tried out and didn't make it. So he would go in with his support or his infantry. He would wear the patch on his arm that said, hey, look, don't let the stars in this beret fool you. I too had to put a wheel on a truck. I served a meal in a mess hall. I had to clean my weapon as a grunt and dig a foxhole, right? And that whole ability to be a perceived chameleon and establish rapport visually with people allowed him to get stuff done. Little things like that. Like, how are we more the same than different in what I'm saying and doing when you're engaging with other people?
Yeah. That's actually pretty incredible, because when I think about what you're doing now, like the community you've built around ATX, the way you connect with founders and builders, so much of that, to me from the outside, comes from your ability to you've been them, you've walked a mile in their shoes, right? You've made those same sacrifices as an entrepreneur, and I think that's pretty incredible to see that connection, because it's so authentic. Right? You show up as one of them, right? As part of the group, looking out for them because you have some empathy for that experience. So I'm curious about, how did you make that transition then from the military into entrepreneurship? Is that an obvious transition? Was it something that took you some time and some figuring out? What was that like?
It's a good question. I think it was a couple different things. One is, there's always this learning curve, experience curve, whatever you call it. You get into something, it's new, it's exciting, and then it becomes routine, or you learn that thing, or it's no longer, you're not learning as much, you're not deriving as much joy or whatever. So part of it was I was in at a very privileged time. It was Clinton, lots of schools, lots of training, the fast track. And so then it came down to, wow, there's a lot of divorce. You have to be on the road a lot, and I'm oldest of 8. Like, I've always wanted to be a parent. I knew that was sort of the goal. And you sort of look at things, and I was like, this has been a good run. Like, I just high water marked. It's kind of like when you play horse or something like that, and there's always somebody in the group, and they're like, over the rafter, off the backboard, blindfold. And you're like, holy, that worked. And people are like, do it again. You're like, no, I'm out. Like, did you get that on film? Somebody record that. I'm out of here. Like end on a high note, whether you're a comedian or whatever it is, right? But like, I was like, this is a great crescendo for me to then take this narrative into some other chapter of ambition that I have. And I really wanted to go into, I didn't even know what investment banking was, but I, watched Pretty Woman, right? So it's a lot of it's like, I don't know if you're like a John Hughes fan, but in the 80s growing up, like, pop culture kind of defined your perception of the world. I mean, I could say that maybe about social media, but back then it was, all the John Hughes films, what music you listened to, and kind of what was on TV, right? And so I was like, so this blowing stuff up, special operations thing, it's interesting. What's this investment banker stuff? How do I go from getting rained at in the middle of the woods and swatting off mosquitoes to like dating models and like driving a DeLorean? Like, sign me up for that. How does that work? And so I was like, I gotta be, and it's been being surrounded by dudes in the woods, right? Getting rained on. So then I was like, all right, I got to go into this investment banking thing. And then that was glamorized. And then you're basically like a hazed intern, right? Kind of like working your ass off. So they did, kind of did that. But also too, I just saw the divorce rate in the military. And I was like, man, if I want to be a husband or a dad, like whatever I do, I want to do it right. I'm just not going to do it at all. And if I really wanted to be a parent, I was like, I am not going to be the absentee dad that's not there for my kids being born and then all the daisy chain of junk that comes along. So I was like, I got to get a real job in the civilian sector that allows me to make more money, unlimited money. The other thing about the military that was tough is no matter how hard you worked and how dangerous the job was, you got paid the same regardless. So Staff Sergeant Shonk or Captain Shonk or whatever it is, whatever you do, somebody who the biggest risk might be a paper cut is getting the same paycheck you're getting. And that just didn't seem kind of right. Like at least in my perspective of things. I mean, that's why I gravitated towards entrepreneurship and asymmetric outcomes. Like if we're going to be here, it needs to be not finite because I'm voting with my time. So there's only certain things in life that are truly asymmetric, and it's generally things that have unlimited upside. And so where does that unlimited upside scenario exist? Entrepreneurship, maybe investing, handful of places, right? So that kind of got me thinking that way. Was that kind of your question?
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. And you started essentially bringing pawn shops online and using technology to basically scale those businesses. You also had a gaming business. Which was the most interesting business you worked on?
So yeah, they're all interesting. They're all at phases of different things that were in transition. So I like the chaos before the structure, right? And that's the military is like that. Like every good thing had some shakeup. Independence Hall happened, then the Revolutionary War, and then like the New World, right? And so there's always this dynamic, and people either understand chaos and can navigate ambiguity, or they fear it and run from it. And if you can navigate it well and create the policies and procedures and sort of roadmap, then who better than you to lay claim to that manifest destiny and be a market participant, right? So it could happen in the early cloud, the creating of the .coms, AI, there's always electrification. It goes back to fire, right? Oh, wow, steel, that's interesting. The steam engine, fantastic. Electricity, it's like there's all these different new paradigms where the incumbents get scared. And then somebody who with the right mindset and the right motivation says, I can harness that. Oh, I don't have to spend as much. Oh, I don't need to own it. I can share it. Like there's some breakthrough, and it usually drives down the cost of entry. Like the table stakes to get into the game just changed. So now new players can enter and it's more scalable and it's less expensive, or you can move faster, whatever. So I think each one of those was an important thing. That the pawn shops were really interesting because it was the merger of multiple things. It was early e-commerce and the ability to sell things without having to be physically present. And it was organizing all the inventory with software and automation, which also hadn't really been done, a lot of clipboards and stuff. And then the great financial recession happened at the same time. And, the market got its tail handed to it. And we were operating in greater Phoenix. So our markets were Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Florida, right? So like the floodgates were open. So that was really interesting, of right time, right place, different tectonic shifts, create a new platform, leveraging technology. So military, investment banking, the pawn shops, the video game company, all of these things were industries that were already known. And there was a shakeout going on. So in the video games, like you and I probably grew up, I'd mow yards and go down and feed quarters to the convenience store to play Street Fighter, man, or whatever it was, right? And then you got a console. Holy smokes, my TV is now, I've got a Nintendo, I've got a PlayStation, whatever. So then the browser. Now I can play games on my computer. Wow. Now I have a computer in my pocket, phones. And so that whole driving down the accessibility of entertainment and gaming to me was fascinating. And then social media started happening at the same time. So it's not like me playing against it. It's me playing with you. We are playing. So back to like, I'm a team guy. So I was like, oh, community, team, like, you're collaborating, you have a role to play, like all that stuff. And later you would learn that it's all like very architected and amazing things. But to be there for those foundational movements and be a contributor to the marketplace was really exciting. So I'm always looking for some big new thing and how you can learn from history. Because I think one thing about entrepreneurship, politics, being a leader in general is that history and people don't really change. And there's magic in that, because no matter what the task is, no matter what the objective is, there's so much risk. There's so much ambiguity. There's things outside of your control. What isn't going to change is it takes people to get things done. And people aren't really that different. I don't care where you're from, how old you are, what gender, what flag you fly. Maslow, we're all subject to Maslow. We're born, we die, we put our pants on one leg at a time. And just remembering that, and then trying to go back and say, how is this opportunity, or where has this shown itself before? Did the Romans address this? Did the colonials address this? Did the Native American, like, where can we borrow from history how this might work out? And then at least change the odds of success around it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and it seems like if you're leveraging and leaning into your military career, obviously being a student, learning, taking on challenges, being adaptable, sort of seeing and looking for opportunities, sort of being strategic, while also being able to be tactical, all of those things together, it looks like you really lean into in those early days in entrepreneurship. What did you have to unlearn or stop doing that may have been imprinted in you in that military experience that maybe would lead you to be less successful had you kept doing it or keep doing it in these other endeavors as you made this transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has been hard because I've had a lot of friends I've sort of met, that kind of lost their way, if you will. Staying in something too long without shaking it up creates a sense of complacency and a false sense of reality. So if you are in an organization for 30 years, you might know the IBM way, or this is the Harvard way, or this is the military way, really. And that is a version of the real world, but that itself is not the real world. And understanding that is really tough. There's multiple ways. And anytime there is the way, you have to kind of scratch your head a little bit. And that's the thing about the military. It becomes very comfortable. I mean, comfort is human nature. People, I think, want to be comfortable. Like, it's easier to be not in pain, right? Or not uncomfortable. But that line between comfort and complacency is a very thin line. And when comfort turns to complacency, alpha disappears, exceptionalism goes away, all kinds of things come to roost. And then it's really hard to then S-curve or transition when one becomes complacent. And I think that's what was hard about the military is it's at the 20-year retired people, it's a generalization. Really hard to get them to like reframe versus you catch somebody, 3-4 years in, bam, they got the best that they could get. They're going to take that. It's an arrow in their quiver and they're going to go find another arrow. And so I think it is, the old dog, new tricks. It's hard to teach an old dog, new tricks. Like, these cliches are timeless because there's truth to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And so I just think that, again, and also too, traveling the world and seeing the world for what it is a gift and a privilege and a blessing. And it's flattening very quickly. And whether it's us, our children, other people asked about with transitioning, understanding how we're more alike than different in that we have shared goals. Like, we just keep going up. It's like, okay, well, you like ice cream. I'm lactose intolerant. Okay, we're not going to start there. You like food. Okay, cool. We both like food. Everybody here like food? Awesome. All right. Famine, upheaval, bad. Global warming, bad. Cool. So you just keep on going. It doesn't matter whether you're like banging rocks together in Africa or like, taking a private jet somewhere. At some point, we all are stewards of our lives and the world. And so you're going to find these common goals of, hey, nobody wants global warming to continue. Nobody wants our kids' lives to be worse than ours. You focus on that stuff and then like, what can be done about it? And then what are we going to do about it? And then as taking ownership of my role in the we, what am I going to do? And that's when you kind of start doing that stuff that people say, this isn't my enemy. This is my competitor. This isn't a guerrilla chief that controls a company or an oligarch. This is a channel partner, right? And so you just have to translate what it is, right? This isn't, these aren't avenues of approach. This is route to market, right? Like, you just change it. It's the same stuff that's been going on since, Cyrus and Alexander the Great and all that. It's just, you have to reframe it, right? Like, nobody's throwing slings anymore. We're doing cyber attacks, right? And so once you understand that, the nature of that, it really is an easy way to transition. And I think that people that had to get parachuted in to hostile environments where they were outnumbered, that chameleon dynamic, and that's really what special operations is known for, is like, hey, look, there's 12 people here. against millions. We have to turn this country around. So we better get in here, establish rapport with these people. Half of them might hate us. And how do we all start high-fiving and get the job done?
Yeah.
Right? Like that is a skill.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a credible skill that obviously you built up. So as we were talking about that transition and what to sort of unlearn or guard against, you're talking about guarding against sort of the routine, the complacency, that potentially sets in with that. And you mentioned sort of finding the S curve, right? So in this context, what does that mean to you, finding the S curve, and how did you do that?
So it's funny because we know each other as, as people and fathers. The S curve was driven by life, not by some career amount. Like what could be the next crescendo? And it's really like, hey, how do I not have people staring around my casket, saying, what, why or what if or whatever. Right? So what is it that quote, like the, of all the words of tongue and pen, the saddest are what might have been kind of thing. Right. But these things are real. And so I was like, all right, so I'm going to choose the father path. I don't want to be a bad father. And so I know the perils of being an entrepreneur. I've walked them, and I have to salute the serial entrepreneurs that have a family and choose to get back into the arena. Call me a wimp. I'm not doing it. I went from player to coach, and I want to be in the game. I want to play a role that's helpful, but I am not willing to miss the birthdays and max out the credit cards again. It's just my risk profile is different. It doesn't mean my ambitions are different. It's this fact, the ambitions are even more so. Because when you have nothing to lose, you will think a certain way. When you have something to lose, you actually think a certain way. And so there's this notion, I think, that is in some ways incorrect, where it's like, look, throw the cavalier people there, break some eggs, make an omelet, burn the boats. We're going to do this thing, send them all off, conscript them and send them off. I will tell you the indigenous person there to defend their family will outfight the single guy, right? So when you have something to lose, that's not bad. Neither one are bad. But because I have something to lose, focusing on what can I win without losing this changes how you do the risk reward. And if you're voting with your time or your dollars, it's really about probabilities of risk reward and time. If we start this company, if everybody quits their nice tech jobs and we do this, what is our probability of making X amount of money in X amount of time frame and like ringing that bell on NASDAQ? And people focus on the what could go wrong side. If the market's this big and we could do that and we could raise more money, what if that doesn't work out? What's our plan B? Like, in the military, it's primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, PACE. Right? When you have to think what could go wrong, there's some beauty in that. And so that's why I was like, I'm going to be done being an operator in traditional sense. But I found that the industry of venture capital, similar to like looking at video games with, smartphones or software with pawn shops, whatever it might be, the industry of alternative investments was ripe for disruption. And the most ripe for that was venture capital by definition. And it was largely run by financial people backing technical people. I thought that was really interesting. It was like a lost in translation thing. Like, oh, okay, so you don't have you have non-clean water here and you don't know about malaria. I could help you with that, right? And so there was this world of technical builders that were trying to communicate and get value from people that were giving them money, and they were confusing the roles and the ability of that money to add value. And so it was one of the only, in fact, it's the only place I've seen as far as an industry where one can be a coach without being a player. I mean, maybe you help me out, you're an athlete, but most coaches have to know something about the game. Like they played, they wore the jersey.
Yeah.
Venture capital is not like that. Most fund managers have never shipped a product, fired a co-founder, had to go raise a debut round, maxed out their credit cards. Like to me, it was like this, I couldn't believe what's happening. So the people that are in charge of on sitting on boards and giving money to founders have never actually walked in their shoes. That just seemed crazy. And so I was like, well, if I am a builder that can help builders and I can write a check, maybe that's the way venture capital should be done at the early stage. I think that engineering, growth equity, and crossover is a different animal, right? There's a different role. But that was sort of what I wanted to do because I wanted to start a family. I wanted to be in the game. I wanted to have unique value I could bring to the marketplace. And the business model had to work with my life architecture. And so fund manager was it. And that's why I got into it. That, it really is this weird thing where it's the only industry I've ever seen where those who are in charge of coaching and governance and held and revered in positions of authority and actually gatekeeping resources to a large extent haven't played the game. And you hear a lot about empathy, like you talk to most fund managers, right? And you probably heard this before, but you probably dealt with these kind of people, right? It's like, well, how do you get into these great companies, or why would those founders take your money? And usually the answer is, because I'm empathetic. I ask good questions. I'm so empathetic, right? And it's kind of like, what is it in Liar Liar, when he's like, that's just something ugly people tell themselves to make them feel good or whatever, right? Like the reality is amazing operators, like like empathy is table stakes. Like, oh, you're smart. Oh, well, guess what? Everybody here's smart. Empathy is absolutely table. Like if you're leading with, I'm likable and I have empathy, take my money, that's good on the margin. What people really want is timely, pragmatic, relevant advice. It's like the coach who's out there and they're like, well, I think I read maybe you should try, balancing your weight a little bit, shifting your center of gravity down, doing that, versus like somebody comes out here and like just judo flips you and like, this is how we're going to do it, right? Like, let me show you where to put your feet.
Yeah.
I think that being empathetic and being well read is not enough to be in the arena giving real-time advice. And I think there's also kind of like, I've talked about the wartime, peacetime, like there's a wartime, peacetime CEO, there's a wartime, peacetime board member. And right now, founders, we're in a lull, right? There's a market reset. Nobody's like going to empathy their way out of a problem. They're like, bring me historic facts and pragmatic solutions around what actions we can contemplate and then execute on to pull this plane up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so with that and what you're building at ATX, like what is the role that you want ATX to have in the market with founders? Like tell me what you're trying to build there at ATX.
Yeah. So I think, from your 0 to 1, let's ship a product. Like there's a reason why I like 12-man teams and not like 1,000-person divisions, right? I like the ambiguity, the risk, and sort of the nature of getting product out there, getting that initial team built, nailing what it is that's your customer, solving product market fit, and kind of getting to $5 to $10 million of revenue. And could I hang out longer? Yes. Am I best suited for that? No. And so there's other people so I like to put like, spark turns to flame, flame turns to inferno. There's a lot of people that can take a flame and turn it into an inferno. Spark to flame is really hard. And what I like about it, maybe it's like, I want to say it's noble or something like that. But if there's all these downstream activities, but nothing matters unless you get a fire, who cares? Somebody has to be, and we're not the guys with the big AUM, we're not the big wealthy open-ended fund, laying on trades kind of guys, right? I mean, trades, it was something that a product, what happened there? Was any value created? Arguable, I don't know. But the thing of, hey, if we do this, there's a whole daisy chain of subsequent activities and service providers and employees and value to be extracted. But somebody's got to turn spark to flame. Somebody's got to get product market fit done. And the checks are small, which means the funds are generally small. The glory's huge. The work is hard. The risk is, it's all just, I love it. I love that like the table stakes are big. The risk is high. The ambiguity is high. But if you do it right, can you make a lot of money? Yes. But can you leave a life of meaning and build relationships with really interesting people in a chapter of their voyage that will become narrative for lives and industries hereafter? Yes.
That's amazing. Is there one particular investment partnership that you're most proud of? And whether you can speak about them directly or just, at a high level, what's an example of that you?
There's a couple. I've worked with teams multiple times. That's the fun part about this too, is seeing the founders that you've made money with go off and start it again, or say, hey, I'm this VC thing looks kind of interesting. Like I too am going to have a family. Do you need like a special limited partner, an operating partner? I mean, I think that's a special thing. So it's hard because there's multiple companies that I would say have great stories. There's a couple that fit in this category. So maybe I'll do it categorically and then mention a specific company. Although there are a couple specific, but it's really interesting founders. We had tons of money because they were smart enough to be in the right place at the right time. So, full cap tables, lots of money, everybody's sort of there. It's easy. It's good. We look like we're in the right place at the right time. And then something like whether it was, great financial crisis or right now, like this reset where it is getting harder. And yes, there is a tailwind, but that tailwind is fleeting and there's a headwind now. And there was some kind of reset. Like we had to lay off people quickly. We had to go back to the drawing board. I like to go back to the drawing board things because it's easy to lay out if this, then that, everybody knows how to play risk. Like, you get your little South America, or you get your little, Australia, then you expand and protect. Like the world doesn't need any more like consultants to lay out, well, if you solve product market fit, then you can land and expand. And if you land and expand, then I'll unlock the KPIs to get to Series B. Like, yes, that is exactly how it should work. Guess what? It never works out that way. So that's when you really have these moments and you see who is there thinking about, we raised this money. I've got this team of people. We've got some customers. What are we going to do? And it's always been with founders that just were fixated on a problem, that had an axe to grind for a personal reason. Not like they all just graduated from an Ivy League MBA and said, something interesting is going to happen in LLMs and cloud. Let's go run that direction, right? There was something that they saw or a splinter in their thumb or just something that bothered them that they're like, I am going to find a way to solve that problem. And, you hang out with them and you figure that out and then you unlock this other chapter. But there could have been an alternate, because what happens in venture, it's very different than most sports or even being a parent where like, love all the kids. Like it is feed or abandon. By definition, the whole industry is you're on fire, let's get behind you and push, or this is a dumpster fire, I'm out of here, right? And talk to any founder, they've had to deal with the like, peace, this didn't work out, it sucks to be you, right? That's why I'm a fund manager, right? That is a sad reality of it. But a lot of times that luck and timing of it could have been amazing. There was a couple decisions that could have been made that would reframe it if you went back to the drawing board. So, you were there for the sharing economy and everything, right? So it's like, everybody has an asset. We have multiple homes, multiple boats, multiple planes, ninja loans, whatever. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, sure, I'll let a stranger stay in my house because I'm levered to the hilt and then going to get foreclosed on. Or yeah, well, let somebody sit in my car. Will I ride with a stranger? Yeah, maybe I will ride with a stranger. And so these things are born from chaos where you go back to the drawing board and say, well, maybe we don't have to own that. Or maybe if there is the right rules-based algorithm, two people that don't know each other can hang out or meet up or date. Like there's all kinds of ways to change things if you're willing to go back to the drawing board, find the root customer or the stakeholder, and then just pull on that thread and interrogate the data and have some candid questions around it. Right?
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, as we think about this conversation, again, we explored this through line between you growing up at a squad or a team of 8, some early interest that you had around adventure, let's say, and exploring and pushing yourself, taking challenges. You decided to take that challenge in the military. And through that, you've basically continued that thread of working with small teams on massive missions, right? Fighting the world, trying to make something massive happen. What advice would you give, other folks, let's say, that are coming out of the military on how to think about a transition, how to not get complacent, right? How to build the next S curve of their life and their career. And if you had any advice, and you've already said that you end up, mentoring or talking to folks who've come to you for that, what do you find them most telling them? What do you find that you're most telling them in that situation?
Yeah, I would, I think first thing is have a plan of some kind. And, in medical, you call it like an index of suspicion, you're looking like this, you're doing that. You might be diabetic, right? So there's some kind of an index of suspicion around, well, I've done this and seen this, so therefore I might be into that. But this whole like, surprise, you're out of the military. Now what do you do? Right? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like planning for your exit or planning for the next round of funding or whatever it is. So, and then going back to the drawing board of what's possible. I think it's really frustrating to like, oh, I did this and I'm going to put this resume together and send it out there and people didn't get back to me. And, I don't have any way to work my angle or whatever like that. I think that's really tough is really, what are you interested in? You can translate it. So really, I spend a lot of time just on translation. It's like, I'm really fired up about this. It's like, wish I would have gotten to healthcare. I was in field artillery. Oops, maybe I should have been the medical side of it. Well, it's okay. There's still a mission. There's a plan. There's leading people. Like it all goes back to that. Like I just kind of strip it all away. And it's like, did you, were you ever in a leadership position? Cool. Was it a squad? Was it a company? Was it a battalion? Fantastic. So you can communicate vision and get people to do things. All right. Well, let's start with that. You were in a quartermaster, supply chain logistics. Oh, I want to get into aerospace, but I was, the person, pushing around gear and stuff like that. Oh, cool. So you can log, file, procure, inventory things. Maybe you can do that in aerospace. Oh, I was doing that with boots and backpacks and, grappling hooks. Like fantastic. Like there's always a way to translate it. And if you can translate it, it usually is around make something, sell something, devise a plan, execute a plan, attract and lead people. Like the buckets are not, there's all these CXO title, like there's all SVP of this, but it all generally comes back to, I think if I had to hierarchy it, it would be make or sell something. And then there's service and support. There's payroll, there's ops, in fact, for every warfighter, there's like 10 people in service and support, right? Like it's not just some ninja on the ground making it happen. There's a whole world of things around them. So there's more on the service and support sort of iceberg under the water, right? So I think that's kind of it. But if you kind of go from, all right, are you just support making or selling? Boom, boom, boom. Do you want to be involved in that? If not, here. And then that's really kind of it. And then I think that what I found is there's chapters of history we have as humans, back to kind of pop culture and all that kind of stuff. If you're 70 years old, you probably see the world this way. If you're 60 years old, here's what you were subject to. In fact, it's more predictable, I think, the further back in time you go, because there wasn't a lot of individual snowflake opportunity. You couldn't go procure your own content on the internet. You watched Dan Rather at night, and that's what you did. And the newspaper was on your front door, and you didn't move too far away from home. So people are more predictable, I think, the further back you go, because there's just less distractions and less access, right? So I've found that men generally who are older, who might have been in the military or got drafted for Vietnam, maybe they came out and did something pretty amazing. Those people get it. And you just got to get through, the conscientious objector, military bad. Like, no. People are just people, right? But somewhere out there, if you kind of look through the totem pole of an organization, the hierarchy, somebody there is going to be like, yep, I was in the Peace Corps. Yes, I managed an international team. Maybe I was in the military. And you find that person and say, hey, look, remember those days? Like, this is what I've done. You're in a position of success. Is there a job I can do for you? What bag can I carry?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, maybe this is a good place to leave off and think about our next conversation, because you highlighted something really important, which is, you've got this set of skills, this set of attributes that make you unique in any environment, in particular that environment. Yours, it sounded like, as you highlighted, it was this ability to look at the resources available and the needs of people and make sure everybody got what they needed. And you were always going to find a way to be fine with the resources that you were getting. So you were living more in this world of abundance versus scarcity, let's say. And it looks like that's translated really well into what you do today. You're making sure people have the resources they need in the squads and teams that they're in to go accomplish what they need. And in the end, you're going to be fine and you're participating in that with them. But the key to this, which you probably had less of a challenge, but you're highlighting, is how do you position what you've learned, those skills you've built, who you are, into what you do next to be able to get through some of that wall or those objections of getting into the next thing. That'd be worth thinking about how to position and break through some of that. But also what you're describing is how do you lean into those things and not shy away from them, right? And then as we talked about, what do you have to unlearn or make sure you guard against so that it doesn't hold you back, when you get there. So we need to have more time. We're actually up on time. You see?
Oh, I was going to ask
I got. Yeah.
Oh, we have to go right now?
Yeah. Well,
I was going to tell you one little quick.
Okay, do it. Yeah.
All right. So I just thought about this because the growing the pie dynamic.
Yeah.
Right? People that want to grow the pie, chasing abundance. There was a story. We're all sitting around in the rain. It's cold. It's February, North Carolina. We couldn't have a fire because it's not tactical. So you're just wet, laying on the ground soaking the energy out of you. You're like literally spooning with like the guy next to you shivering and everything like that, right? And got your rifle this way. And then, we kind of spent through most of our food. We had set some snares, but nothing was going on. It was just the suck. Terrible time, right? In fact, my nickname was Tauntaun. Like if you've seen Star Wars, like everybody wanted to snuggle with me. Or maybe I'd throw off more body heat or something. So that was like the Tauntaun. So I'm sitting there in like my 6 o'clock position, and all of a sudden I feel something on my chest. I'm like, oh, what is this kind of poking me? So I reach inside, and there's this thing called a charm. And charms are like a Jolly Rancher. You get them in your rations. I had one little charm left, and we are all like, tired, hungry, whatever. And you could hear the like unraveling of the paper, and everybody's like, I know that sound. Somebody's got some snacks. And so I look around, I see my buddy's like, yeah. So I get a rock, and I take this rock and I put my rifle butt on it, and I hit it, and I go bam, and I smash it into like, and this thing is like the size of a nickel, right? And it creates like 20 shards, and I pass it around, and people are like getting one little shard. It's like that. But it was this whole thing of like, it's never yours, it's ours.
Yeah.
And like, you can find joy in those little things that just change everything for everybody, right?
That's amazing. That is amazing. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please review and follow this podcast on all your favorite platforms. And if you want to continue the conversation one-on-one, feel free to reach out direct. You can find my information in the show notes. And we want to share your story. So if you're passionate about helping others through transitions to find their center and find their best path forward, feel free to reach out and let me know.